Scotland in action for the first time since we made the World Cup. What can we expect from Japan? And how long will Steve Clarke be the manager? I'm Charlotte Cohen, and alongside Michael Grant and Tom English, we're all set for some international excitement. Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Friday the 27th of March. And Scotland are back.
McTominay! What a start! McTominay with the most overhead kick you will ever see in Scotland, and after the perfect start!
Steve Clarke's men hit the Hampden turf for the first time since Denmark. Can they keep the feel-good factor going with less than 80 sleeps until Haiti?
Like you said, for 28 years for Scotland to be going back to a World Cup, just for the nation itself, it's so special. So to give back to the people from here, and obviously for us players to achieve that, it's really special.
They face tricky opponents in visitors Japan, and there's questions over the manager's future. But can Scotland give us some more magical memories as the World Cup excitement builds?
He's looking to go for goal from the halfway line. It's chipped. Glorious! Kenny McLean!
We'll fill you in on everything Scotland right here.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
And alongside me to do that, Michael Grant, Times Scottish football correspondent. Michael, are you excited to see Scotland back in action again?
I am. Yeah, I am indeed, Charlotte. And, your comment there about 80 sleeps to the Haiti game, I wonder if Steve Clarke will get 80 sleeps. He might get to about 70. I'm not sure he'll do much sleeping before that Haiti game because, wow, it's massive, isn't it, already? I cannot think beyond that game. I know it's silly, really, when we've got Morocco and Brazil in a World Cup, but I do think that Haiti game will be enormous. But yeah, exciting. We're already thinking about it.
Absolutely. And alongside us to chat all things Scotland, BBC Scotland's chief sports writer, Tom English. Tom, are you excited to see Steve Clarke's men back out on the turf?
I sure am. And it's a great game to come back to. Japan, great opponents, some very familiar players there, and a real test. You could look at the whole Scotland campaign was such an incredible experience, culminating in that incredible crescendo against Denmark. But it was really interesting in so many different ways. Scotland might have been in the playoffs. Instead, they're in, and it could have been if Denmark had beaten Belarus, they had 34 attempts on goal that night, Scotland would be in the playoffs. Instead, they're in the promised land of World Cup. So I'm not quite sure where Scotland are, Charlotte. We constantly think of Denmark, understandably, because it was one of the greatest nights ever. But before those were games or performances that make you go, I'm not so sure,
Well, yeah, that is the question, isn't it? I mean, what will we learn, Tom, do you think, from this game against Japan?
Well, we'll learn if they can kick on, if they can build from the incredible feel-good of the Denmark victory and the energy, the electricity, the brilliance of it. The attacking elan that they showed that night, and some defensive resilience too. Can they build on that? I'm just thinking about this earlier on when Scotland qualified for the Euros last time around. That's when things started to fall off a cliff, when they made the qualification, when they qualified. So I just don't want to see that happen again. I don't want to see a kind of limp, passive performance.
Yeah, that's the big thing, isn't it, Michael? Tom mentions it. We've seen before how a kind of poor run of friendly games can really affect the confidence. So it's massive that Scotland get a good bit of momentum from these two friendlies looking ahead to the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, they're the games, obviously, that Steve Clarke wanted. He wanted to play non-European teams to kind of get a sense of different cultures, different styles. I mean, we're not playing an Asian side at the finals, but it'll be different. It's not the bulk of the players aren't going to be familiar. Tom makes a good point about, when we've qualified before or via playoffs, it's there. It suddenly rushes at you. It's actually been lovely to have the kind of last, whatever it is, 4 months of knowing that we're there, and there's been a lot of fun and a lot of excitement and build up on that, and it's only going to intensify. I think Japan will be a real test for Scotland at Hampden. I think wake-up call's not the right word, is it? But it could be quite okay, right, it's been fun knowing that we're qualifying, but now there's going to be work to do, the campaign, the results were good, the performances weren't always good. But we got there. I think probably a theme that we'll revisit close at the tournament is the worry that we start tournaments so poorly. We've got a terrible record in the opening games of tournaments, which obviously long predates Steve Clarke, but it includes Steve Clarke. And I think that is something that we're going to be talking about and writing about closer at the tournament. But I think this, to go back to your question, I think this will be a real test for Scotland. They're a accomplished and substantial side, Japan, and World Cup regulars.
What about the squad then, Tom? Because I think people were maybe a little bit surprised to not see some new faces in the squad. Obviously, Finlay Curtis, kind of the notable addition there. But were you expecting to maybe see a couple more fresh faces for these games?
No, I wasn't. Steve Clarke and fresh faces, they're not words that go together all that well. I was disappointed maybe for Craig Halkett. But I can see why he's picked the centre halves that he's picked. I didn't think that he'd pick Ollie McBurney, but I feel he should have done. Now, I know Ollie McBurney is not everyone's cup of tea. He hasn't played for Scotland for 5 years. He was very poor when playing for Scotland, but that was 5 years ago. And his record this season is better than any of the other strikers. I mean, he's got 14, playing in the championship for Hull, he's got 14 goals in 32 games. That's a hell of a strike rate. And yet he's not in the picture. If you're picking George Hurst over Ollie McBurney, I think that's a curious one. Because George Hurst, I'm not sure what he brings. He doesn't bring many goals, that's for sure. So apart from that, no, I didn't expect to see any of the young guns that people have been talking about. That's not Steve Clarke's way.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, we're all very accustomed to Steve Clarke's squads and teams and the players that he likes to have in there. And this almost rigidity that he seems to have with the squad. Is there a worry, though, that that's maybe holding Scotland back?
I think it's a criticism that's always been levelled at Clarke over his, whatever it is now, 7 years, that... And obviously that's kind of grown as he's shown his loyalty to a core group of players. His defence against that is always, well, look, 3 tournaments out of 4, these guys have shown they can do it. I mean, I think we all yearn for fresh blood and evolution in the squad. And I would have liked, a couple of others, but it's easy to say that. There isn't that much out there, Charlotte, to be honest with you. There really isn't. Finlay Curtis was the only unexpected name, and probably he's only in because Ben Gannon-Doak's out. Gannon-Doak is just coming back, thankfully. Played about 5 minutes for Bournemouth at the weekend, was on the bench the previous week. And injury-wise, we're without Hickey and Craig Gordon, aren't we, who are 2 that would definitely be in. Hanley is in the squad, although hasn't played for weeks. John McGinn's just back from a lengthy layoff. McTominay missed a month, but is back and playing. Gilmore's back. So it's not too bad at the moment, fingers crossed. But yeah, as Tom said, in terms of fresh blood and excitement and wow, knocking us off our feet, that's not Steve Clarke's way. I mean, we know what a Steve Clarke squad's going to be like, with maybe one exception max in any new squad.
And I can understand it, Michael. Because he wants the core group. They're all comfortable in each other's company. They know the way the camp works. They know what Steve Clarke is looking from them. He doesn't want to bring in a wave of players that have never been in that environment before. He might see that as a bit of a waste of time. He wants to hit the ground running. Doesn't have much time here. So he wants that familiar group that know exactly the lay of the land, and so they can hit the ground running from day one of the camp.
Yeah, and all the more so when it's a World Cup, Tom, because, he's loyal anyway, but he's going to be even more loyal when it's a World Cup. It means so much to everybody, including these players that he's been the backbone of his entire reign, a lot of them. So it's like, okay, you guys, you deserve it. You deserve the World Cup that we've all been waiting for nearly 30 years. So, an already loyal manager is going to be ultra loyal at the moment, unless somebody's form completely falls apart or they're injured. And that, as I say, that's always going to be his defence against that criticism. He say, look, these guys have got us here.
Here's a question for you then, Tom. What happens after the World Cup when this core group of players finishes and he's not bedded in really anybody new over the past couple of years?
What happens after the World Cup? I don't really care. What happens after the World Cup? I don't. I mean, we'll deal with that when it happens. You just got to win the battles in front of your face. And right now, it's the build-ups and it's the World Cup games, and there's nothing else matters outside of that orbit. You cast your mind forward. What happens? Like, does Steve Clarke stay or go? I don't know. I don't really care right now. I'll care after the World Cup, and then I'll sit down and I'll think about it. But right now, he's the manager. He's the guy holding all the aces. He's the one who's picking the squad, picking the team. And there are some players out there, young players, to maybe after the World Cup, you start to bleed them in, whether it's Steve Clarke or not. But right now, I'm not looking any further than Japan and Ivory Coast, and then the build up to the World Cup, and then the World Cup itself.
Charlotte, a lot of these players will want to stay around to retain the trophy in 4 years' time. But actually, what I think will be important. I mean, listen, after a World Cup is normally it's a punctuation mark, isn't it, in the kind of international careers of a lot of guys, and you will have that debate, and you might have international retirements. Against that, though, guys like Robertson and John McGinn, I think, are very conscious of their cap totals and just how high they could get, and that'll be a motivation maybe for these guys who have never shown anything other than brilliant loyalty and brilliant attendance at Scotland games. But I think these guys might think, well, look, how high can I go? I mean, Robertson can break the record. McGinn can get into the 90s, can't he? So I think that'll be a motivation for players like that who maybe otherwise might have said, okay, we've done the World Cup, that's as good as it gets for a Scotland player. Maybe these guys will keep going. But I think that will be a debate about whether Clarke stays or goes. I think that'll depend on how good the tournament is for us. Maybe you might get one or two retirements, but it also is a natural point for fresh blood, if there's any out there, to come in for the Nations League games.
Tom, you've been pretty critical, shall we say, of Steve Clarke in the past, but do you think you were maybe wrong about that, given what he's achieved with the nation so far?
Well, I think I was critical when it was fair to be critical. I've always given Steve Clarke great praise for what he has done, and I'm giving him great praise now because he's created history by doing what he's done. But you can't be blind to the really poor results along the way. I don't see those now as all that relevant because of he's got Scotland to a World Cup. So no, I think I was critical when, you think back to the Republic of Ireland match in Dublin, you think back to the Ukraine match, you think back to the Nations League, some of the Nations League games. These were poor results. But Steve Clarke is incredibly resilient. And just when you think maybe this is the end, he delivers again, and that's a sign of a terrific manager. And he's heroically deadpan. You get nothing out of him whatsoever. And I kind of like the battle, but you always lose it with Steve Clarke because you never get Michael's laughing here because he knows. You never really get much of a line out of Steve Clarke. As much as you try, you might empty yourself into a press conference and you won't get much from him. And I think he sees that as a little victory. He's said that in the past. He sees these press conferences as a little battle. So I don't think he cares much what we say, but I think he's been given by myself and by all others massive, massive praise. But you can't have the pom-poms out. We're not cheerleaders here. You have to adapt to different circumstances. And right now, the circumstances around the Scotland team are really, really good.
But Charlotte, when the tournament comes round, I mean, we need to be serious as a football country as well, don't we? We can't. I mean, of course the World Cup's going to be brilliant just to be part of it. But we need a bit more than that as well, you know. We can't, it's not just kilts and sporrans and whiskey and all the kind of cultural stuff that will go around it, and that's great. You know, we need... listen, Scotland have never got out of a group at a tournament. That has to be the objective, and it has to be serious, and that has to be what he's judged on, because he knows that the two tournaments we've reached so far were really poor when we got there. You know, he knows that. He's always bristled at the criticism he got, especially for the Germany campaign, you know, but that's the way people felt. That's the way supporters felt as well. I mean, they felt let down. They'd spent a lot of money to be there. God, they'll be spending, you know, multiples of it to be in America. And, you know, that is the objective. It's not just to be at the World Cup. That's brilliant. I mean, the 28-year ending that cycle is fantastic, and that's entirely down to Steve Clarke and his players. Great credit. But now, you know, we want. It's legitimate to want more as well. It's legitimate to say, right, let's really push hard here to get out of the group. The format is kind of generous, but it still relies on you getting a result, and especially probably in that Haiti game.
Well, let's look back to the game in front of us on Saturday, and let's take a look at the visitors, Japan, because we have Japanese football expert Dan Orlowitz alongside us to chat about Japan. Dan, thank you for joining us. Talk to us about football in Japan. It seems to kind of have exploded in mainstream media in recent years.
Listening to this conversation, I'm struck by a lot of parallels in terms of sort of going back to Scotland breaking this 28-year wait. 1998 was the last time you were in the World Cup, and 1998 was the first time Japan was in the World Cup. And it's really just fascinating to see how these countries have gone in different directions since then, because this will be our 8th straight World Cup appearance. We're looking to reach the round of 16 for what would be the 5th time, and reach the quarterfinals for the first time. So, you know, hearing you guys talk about what Scotland's expectations are and what you're hoping to achieve, like it's a very different conversation than what we're having in Japan, where the expectations are quarterfinals or bust. So this is a really interesting, going back to football in general in Japan, this is a really interesting time for the game. The J-League is in its, it's been 33 years since professional football began in Japan with the J-League. And this year we are transitioning to the European-style fall-spring calendar. So this is a good way for us to take a step back and look at how far Japanese football has come. If you want to look at that 1998 squad, all of those players were based in the J-League. Whereas if you want to look at the squad that's in Scotland, it is almost exclusively players who are based in Europe, I believe, except for 3 who are based in the J-League, 2 of whom are goalkeepers. So we're having a good moment. And the Japan squad, our biggest issue right now is injuries. We're missing several key players. So we're looking for a healthy 26 right now. That's Japan's biggest concern. And I think as far as head coach Hajime Moriyasu is concerned, figuring out his ideal 26 from the deepest pool of players that Japan has ever had. As I said, most of this squad is based in Europe. He's got around 100 Europe-based players to choose from, most of whom are in top division leagues: Belgium, Germany, England, France, probably someone still in Spain. You sort of lose count after a while. But I think that's a very quick summary, but I hope it gives sort of an overview of how strong Japan is looking coming into these games. And on the back of a bunch of really strong friendlies in October and November, has beat Brazil for the first time in a game I was there for, just an absolutely historic result, considering the impact that Brazil has had on Japanese football. Obviously, we all saw the last World Cup taking down Spain and Germany in the group stage. You know, I think there is always an expectation that Asian teams are going to the World Cup and happy to be there. But really, Japan is not there to play. Japan is there to win. And as I always say, Japan can go as far as it wants to go.
You mentioned the injuries there, but who are the main players that Scotland will need to watch out for at the weekend? Obviously, a lot of Scottish people very familiar with Daisen Maeda, who's having a bit of a dip at the moment, shall we say? But who are the danger men for Japan?
I think a lot of Celtic players are having a bit of a dip at the moment, but we're not that we're not on that podcast. I think that obviously you'll be familiar with Kaoru Mitoma, Ritsu Doan, who's been phenomenal for Japan for the last approaching 8 or 9 years. I think I remember seeing him against Uruguay after the 2018 World Cup and him being phenomenal. Junya Ito, Ayase Ueda is probably going to be the top striker. Daichi Kamada at Crystal Palace. Defense is where things get a little rough just because of all the injuries. Hashioka is sort of the only option at right back. We don't really know what the defense is going to look like just because of how thin the injury situation is. But I think as far as goalkeeper is concerned, Zion Suzuki is coming back from injury. He has been playing. He hasn't really looked good, but he's GK1 until a decision is made, with Keisuke Osako the likely GK2.
Dan, you look at Japan's results, and obviously they qualified top of the group, only lost one game. And then you had those run of friendlies, as you pointed out, Brazil, Ghana, Bolivia, all victories. The Brazil one is the one that obviously stands out, 3-2. What was it that Japan did that was, first of all, how strong a Brazil team was it? And what did Japan do to cause Brazil such troubles on the day?
It was a fairly strong Brazil team. I think that obviously when a team like Brazil are traveling as much as they have to travel to get to Asia, they may not be at their peak, but I think you still have to play the game with the players you have and the condition they're in, and it is a matter of immense pride for Brazil to go and win every game. I will say that they did a lot to really frustrate Brazil defensively, and I think the biggest changes that we saw from that team were at halftime. Hajime Moriyasu is one of the most gifted halftime coaches I think I've seen, in that he just knows how to make these adjustments that will tilt the course of the game in favor of Japan. And that's something we saw at the World Cup. That's something that we saw against Brazil. I think he's very good at reading the game as it's happening, which is kind of frustrating because I think that we have seen how Japan can attack, and we want to see that from the start. But he has his plan, and he's, to his credit, stuck with it, and that's part of what gave us that result against Brazil. And it was brilliant. Seeing that stadium erupt was special. It was probably the best non-competition match I've seen Japan play in person.
Thank you very much, Dan, for all your insight on Japan. It's given us lots more information and perhaps slightly less optimism than I had this morning, certainly. But thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the game.
Thank you, and good luck to you guys too. We'll see how it goes.
Well, finally, let's take a look at Steve Clarke. Because one of the things, Tom, that I've seen swirling of late, Steve Clarke and Celtic. Can you see that happening?
The one, and I'm very, very, very old, Charlotte, right? I am extremely old. And one of the things that I have learned over my many years is never to second guess anything in Scottish football. Because you're made to look a fool, as I have been many times this season. Could it happen? Yes, it could. Would Celtic fans want it to happen? I don't want to speak for them. But certainly some of the Celtic fans I know have articulated the views that they wouldn't want to see Steve Clarke come in. That they'd want to see somebody maybe a bit younger, a bit more European, a bit more in terms of their style of football, a bit more flamboyant. I'm not sure that that's necessarily what Celtic need right now. What Celtic need is a lot of wins and a lot of stability. I think Clarke would give them that, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that his face would fit there.
Yeah, Michael, could you see that being a workable combination?
Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible, and I agree with Tom in terms of this season. I mean, he'd be a far better fit than the last permanent manager they appointed. No, let's be honest. Wilfried Nancy, and it's the same people making the decisions. So their potential to make right or wrong decisions is pretty obvious. I can't see it. He's not going to leave Scotland until after the World Cup, which is what's that, kind of third week of, at the earliest it would be the kind of third week of June. I can't see Steve Clarke wanting to throw himself into Celtic then, and qualifiers coming up. I think he would be a name that would be in the kind of in their wider thinking, maybe in case others weren't gettable. He's obviously leaving a door open, isn't he? Or he's trying to put a bit of pressure on the SFA to give him a new deal, which they seem to be just. It's kind of funny from the SFA. It's kind of mixed messages slightly, because if Maxwell and Mulroney are both on record as thinking, I was going to say where the sun shines from, but they're very enthusiastic about Steve Clarke, but they're just stopping short of committing to a new contract with him, and I get that. I understand that, because the public mood will not be good if it goes badly in the World Cup. If it goes well, it's a shoe-in. If he wants a new contract with Scotland, he'll get one, no question. He might get one anyway, but it'll be a different mood around it. Celtic, I'm not sure. As Tom says, his style of football is not a natural, easy fit with the style that the Celtic fans like to see in their teams, But yeah, no, you wouldn't rule anything out, because it's been a crazy season, and it's a club that isn't making great decisions. I'm not saying that Steve Clarke wouldn't be a successful Celtic manager, but he wouldn't be an easy fit, I think, for a lot of their fans.
Do you think he wants to stay, Michael? Were you at that press conference? Was it last week when he kind of changed his position slightly? Yeah. What was your interpretation of his body language and what he was saying?
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of, somebody said to him, "Have you been sounded out by other clubs?" And he kind of, well, maybe, it's like, it sounded like an attempt to just lean on the SFA a little bit and say, well, listen, I could leave here, my stock's high. I don't know, Tom. I think he's maybe at the age he's at, I mean, he's always talked, hasn't he, about wanting one last kind of go on the merry-go-round of club management. But it depends what kind of offer you're going to get, it's no harm to him, but would he want to go into the Championship in England? It's just a slog, isn't it? I mean, it would be a complete lifestyle clash from what he has at the moment, where you have a lot of downtime as a Scotland manager, months of it even, towards the. And I'm not saying he couldn't get a Premier League job, but hard to come by, Championship might be more open to him, but what a slog that is. And I don't know if Steve Clarke would have the stomach for that, and understandable, but at his age. So yeah, I think he might fancy one last go with the team, especially if he thinks a lot of them are going to stay. Because he thinks the world of these guys, and he might think, well, next Euros is exciting too, But listen, I think his mood, again, like all of us, his mood will be set by how it goes in America. If it goes badly and he gets a kicking, he might not be in the mood for hanging about, and he might not get the chance. If it goes well and we get out the group, he's a hero. He's achieved something else that nobody's achieved for Scotland, and then some of the nation at least would be carrying him shoulder high around Hampden.
This is the thing, isn't it? This is going to rumble on throughout the rest of this month into the World Cup campaign, potentially even throughout the World Cup campaign. Tom, do you think that's going to have an impact on the group of players, the mood around the nation?
I would hope. I don't think, and I would certainly hope that it would have any impact on the players. Like, these are seasoned international players. They are, strong-willed. They are mentally robust. They've been through an awful lot in their careers, all their individual stories. These are a lot of tough guys, obviously very talented footballers, but they're tough guys as well. So I don't think they would get to where they are if they allowed things like this to impact on their performance. You know, the future of the manager. I think they will be able to rise above that. And we don't know what Steve Clarke has said to them privately, maybe one-on-one as well, about what he's planning and what he's not planning. But no, I think it's a World Cup prize. I mean, if you try and, I know it's a bit trippy, extremely trippy for me as an Irishman, but imagine trying to put yourself in their place in this Scotland squad, and you're going to a World Cup. You may never get to another World Cup. This is the biggest stage there is. This is you gone from a boy dreaming of this, and now it's a reality. Are you going to let something like, is Steve Clarke going to be our manager in a few months, get in the way of your dream? I don't think you are.
I totally agree, Tom. And also the game, the first game is enormous. I've said that already. And then you've got Morocco. That'll be enormous, regardless of how the first one goes. Then you've got Brazil and Miami. If you're a Scotland player with Vinicius Jr. running at you in 95-degree heat in Miami, you're not going to, I wonder if Steve Clarke's going to sign. You've got issues at hand. You're not worrying about that. But yeah, for us, listen, we'll feast on this stuff, won't we? Until it's resolved, we'll talk it to death, and supporters will be divided on it. Whether he deserves a new contract, whether he deserves it now, whether the sensible thing is to wait till after the tournament, which is kind of my view, I'll be honest, and see how it goes. But and again, who's out there to take over? And you can't. These topics are not in isolation. You think, okay, we'll get rid of Steve Clarke. Okay, and now who?
Well, your weekend listening starts with the Saturday show at 9 o'clock on BBC Radio Scotland, followed by Off the Ball at 12, and Sports Sound starts at 2 o'clock. Right, before I let you both go, we've got a couple of rapid-fire, quick prediction questions. No nonsense, no rambling, just one word. Oh, yeah,
well, you come to the wrong place then if you don't want any rambling. Sorry about that, Charlotte. Yeah. That horse bolted many years ago.
They're easy questions.
These conditions are impossible.
How am I meant to work in these conditions? The first question, Michael, I'll come to you first. Will Scotland win?
No.
Tom?
No.
What is more important, Michael, the results from the game against Japan or the performance?
Performance.
Tom?
Likewise.
And finally, Michael, what will the national mood be on Sunday morning?
Don't go rambling.
Come on, Michael. Come on, Michael. Come on.
You can have 2 words or 3.
Hungover slightly.
Tom?
How many words did you say I have?
Yeah, you can have a couple.
I think cautiously optimistic. I think they might get a draw and they might play okay.
Well, that is all we've got time for. Many thanks to Michael, Tom and Dan, and thank you for listening. Remember, we are here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds, push notifications turned on in your phone. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch you again very soon.
It's petty, it's ill-informed.
Are President Trump's cuts having an adverse effect on research?
It's pandemonium.
What number's that in the periodic table?
PD, number 47. I don't know.
I've done the shooting clays before. The longer you do it, the shorter obviously it gets.
When Craig said there he'd been shooting the clays, I imagined him out a back line. Somebody's washing,
William Shatner, his secretary, contacted me to say, when Bill has a question now and again, can he contact you? And then one time he called me up and he wanted to know, David, what is a photon? I'm thinking, this is incredible. Captain Kirk wants to know what a photon is,
I once met a guy who referred to a globe as a ball map. A ball map.
Look at the ball map.
What we normally do is spin the ball map and we see where we go on holiday.
The Off the Ball podcast, available every Monday on BBC Sounds.